Ultimately, Nick and Hannah's relationship ended up being a demonstration of what contempt looks like. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates, Anya Buile, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, we're going to be breaking down everything that we saw unfold between Hannah and Nick D on Love is Blind Season 7. If you're curious, stay tuned. What's on your mind? So I already talked about both Nick and Hannah in my first impressions video. So if you want to see that, you can click here. However, I'll do a little bit of a recap to bring you up to speed. My overall first impressions of Nick and Hannah were that Nick came across as someone who was overly confident, which is something that turned a lot of the women off.
He was a smooth talker. F-boy question mark?
And Hannah actually ended up coming off as a person who is easily influenced. And I say that because in the lounge, she was encouraged to end things with Nick, and she did that and ended up regretting that decision. She was very affected by Leo trying to convince her to move forward with him when she chose Nick. And so there were some concerns about her age, as she is the youngest in the cast, when it came to moving forward and knowing what she really wanted. We have to talk about the fact that she quit her job to be on the show. That sort of thing is something that always strikes me, because she said,
I want to find love so bad and my job wouldn't let me, so I actually quit my job to be here.
Please keep in mind, like I mentioned in the last video, I got married at 24. So by no means am I saying that a person who's 26 won't know what type of partner they want. I just think that with age comes more experience with dating, for example. And I think that quitting her job to do a show like this, I'm thinking at 26, have you really tried everything else? If she was able to take leave off of work, no problem. But to quit your job for this, I thought was very interesting, because she said she was that committed to love. And whenever I hear somebody quit their job for the show, of course, in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking about the fact that maybe they're thinking that after they're on the show, they could be an influencer and make money that way. So I always start being curious about people's intentions or motivation on the show when they share that they've quit their job to be there. It's not always a bad sign. I mean, some people really are looking for love any way they can. It's just something I definitely pay attention to. And I'm curious, what did you all think about that when you heard that Hannah quit her job? So one of the first things that I want to talk about that we didn't talk about in the first impressions video is that Hannah says that because she feels objectified by Nick, she felt that she would probably be in the type of relationship where she needs to wear makeup all of the time.
He's like someone I think that like I would not want to go to sleep without makeup on.
That sounds like a walking red flag.
And the reason that she's saying that is because with Nick kind of being a bit of a smooth talker, which is how a lot of the women referred to him, he would say things that I think he thought would make a person feel special, but I think it actually made Hannah feel a little worried and insecure, because he was commenting on physical attributes without ever seeing them. Some of the ways that Nick would talk about physical attributes is by talking about celebrity lookalikes.
I'm a little bit better looking than Travis, but
Okay,
hey,
okay.
I think you might be a little bit better looking than Taylor anyway.
Oh, don't say that.
And things like that, things that kind of took the focus away from what's happening on an emotional level and starts moving it more into the physical realm. But Hannah also said some things that I thought might be out of alignment with the whole concept of love being blind. For example, she mentioned in passing how guys find her hot.
They're never interested in me. I am just hot to them, or I'm just like a pretty thing to look at.
And when she's ending things with him, she says to Nick,
I'm scared that like the reason why you like me so much is because you think I'm hot.
so that one was a double-edged sword, because on one hand, she was saying that guys want to be with her because she's hot, so she's saying she's hot. But on the other hand, she has these concerns and fears and insecurities around how she looks in terms of weight. She talked about weight being an issue in the past that has really affected her. She talks about losing a bunch of weight, talks about gaining weight. You know, she talked about dating a quarterback and things in high school, which I think can paint a certain picture. I think that is part of why she ended things with him, just out of fear that he wanted her because he thought she looked good, and she was worried that he might not actually find her as attractive as he was thinking. And I think that as they were talking, Hannah actually might have thought that Nick would be someone who'd be out of her league looks-wise because of the way he was talking about himself. He said he looked like Henry Cavill.
I kind of look like him, like the less buff version of him.
And so you start building this picture in your mind.
Nicky D is so hot. I know he's hot. I know he's Mr. Suave. Like, he's charming and he speaks well and He definitely doesn't have a problem with getting women in the real world.
And I think that she started thinking that he might be disappointed when he saw her. And I think her nerves around that, combined with feedback from the ladies in the lounge, is what led her to prematurely end things with Nick. But we quickly see that she regrets ending things with him. He seemed to be really hurt about her ending things, and that kind of again swayed her, where she's like, oh, well, if he's so affected by it, maybe I should move forward with him. This is showing some of that uncertainty that I was wondering how ready she was for a show like Love is Blind. Now, a lot of people get caught in love triangles on this show, but I just thought the breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together in the course of 10 days, that felt like someone who wasn't really clear on what they wanted. When Hannah re-engages with Nick, she invites him on another date. Once she feels regret about ending things with him, she does go ahead and ask the question that has been haunting her, and I think really influenced her decision to end things in the first place, which is,
Like, what if the reveal, you don't like what you see? Or like,
What if you don't like what you see?
so this shows you that some of her insecurities were really coming to the surface through this process. And I think that's the thing about the physical looks part of this show. On one hand, you could look at it as if a person has physical insecurities, this is the perfect show for them because they don't have to worry about how a person's going to respond to their looks first, which I think is the intention. However, because the most talked about portion of the show is the part where they can't see each other, there's so much anticipation around looks that I think we actually end up having the opposite effect, where looks end up being significantly more important than they might be on another show, because the big reveal is one of the pivotal moments in these couples' stories. Now, you can't always be sure with how the show is edited, but it appears that after Hannah had the conversation with Leo about a prenup,
having a prenup is something that's like really important to me.
No, I get it.
finances were on her mind, and she started talking with Nick about what finances look like.
I'm happy with where I'm at now.
Would you say you do well financially?
Very important to do in the pods. I actually don't think we see enough of those conversations in the pods. People tend to kind of gloss over the financial conversation. And Hannah's basically saying to Nick,
If we get married, do you think we'll be okay financially? Because it's going to take me a second to get a job again.
and Nick is reassuring in that instance,
Like, it is something that is important, I guess, right?
It is important.
but we will see once they get to the real world what it actually looks like. And this is also where Hannah finally shares with Nick about her insecurities around her weight.
I find like in life, like weight and stuff for me has always been like a difficult subject.
As I said in the first impressions video, both Leo and Nick were very validating about Hannah with her weight and said they really didn't have any concerns about it.
I don't care what you look like. I don't care like kind of what you look like in your past. You're beautiful. You're beautiful in my eyes.
So it ended up being a non-factor in the pods. But I do think it's interesting how much her personal narrative around how she may be received influenced her decisions. But once again, even talking about weight is tiptoeing the line when it comes to love being blind. How much do we share? What do we not share? And I'm very curious about how the producers establish the parameters of the show. Like, this is off limits to talk about, or this is okay, or do they just leave it up to the contestants? If you want to catfish, or if you want to share how you look, just go ahead and do that. I'm very curious about what the rules are, because I'm such a rule abider, especially when I play games. So I want to see people sticking to the premise of it, because if we're talking about an experiment, which they love to refer to the show as a social experiment, then we need to have some controls in place. So to me, talking about looks at all kind of compromises the overall aim of the show. But I can understand that if this is a factor that's going to impact whether or not you want to move forward with someone, why it might be important to talk about. We move forward with dates with Hannah and Nick. We still see them kind of talking about looks. Nick tells Hannah that he's in love, and he also says they're going to be a cute couple.
We're gonna be the cutest couple.
It doesn't matter if we're cute, Nick.
I didn't say it like that.
It's interesting to see how Hannah responds in that moment. She doesn't like that he says they're going to be a cute couple, because she feels like that's, again, making assumptions about how she looks. Hannah, you can tell, is very, very worried about Nick being disappointed when he finally sees her. I talk all about Hannah and Leo, and Hannah ending things with Leo in a separate video, the Leo and Brittany video. So if you want to see more about that with her, Please watch that video. So then we get to the big pivotal moment, which is the reveal. I thought it was so interesting how throughout their time in the pods, both with Leo and Nick, Hannah shared so many concerns about how she would be received by them, how attractive they would find her. And I thought it was so interesting how we really kind of saw the opposite play out. And Hannah, she said,
In the pods, he described himself as like a football player, like bigger, medium build, like 5'11". What he said, I don't think was really truthful.
we do see him double down on that once they're in the real world as well.
Wait, how tall are you?
5'11".
I'm
He's not
5'11",
5'11".
sometimes 6
Are we on?
shoes.
Are we on level?
No, you're not. Nick's my height.
Oh yeah, you're high, right?
Yeah.
So Hannah feels that Nick was not honest with her about how he looks. And this is the danger of talking about looks in the pods. Because if they never had that conversation and they were focused on the emotional aspect, there couldn't be a level of disappointment about the looks, at least not frustration about someone being dishonest. So again, when we talk about looks in the pods at all, we really do compromise the experiment. That's why I really liked how Taylor handled it with Garrett, and we'll possibly get to that in another video. But Hannah says,
Because I feel like I'm bigger than him. And like when a guy's smaller than me, like it's not even a me thing, but I know that men start to feel like emasculated by that.
so that was yet to be seen at the time. Is that really the issue? Or is it more that maybe your perception of him is less masculine because you feel bigger than him? I honestly couldn't tell when they were doing the reveal. I'm like, is she taller than him? You know, a lot of times the way they do it, I can't tell at all. And you know, Hannah was wearing chunky heels, so I really couldn't tell that either. I think some of it was just perception, because to me, she didn't seem bigger than him in her own words, but that's how she felt. And Nick does mention,
way to embarrass me by being taller than me.
God bless me, I'm sorry.
I love it though. I love it.
even though Nick says he loves it, in the reunion, he admits
I was underwhelmed when I saw Hannah at the reveal. I never said she was a grenade.
Or
So
number
I never
5,
said
5
that.
out of 10, okay.
the issue here isn't being underwhelmed. We know Hannah felt the same. It's talking to castmates about it instead of talking to your partner, or just keeping it to yourself. After the reveal, they go on the trip to Mexico. And I thought that something Nick said that really struck me and concerned me a bit is when he told Hannah that he didn't want to talk about sex because he has a brand back home.
Because they're gonna pull us aside and be like, so like, what'd you guys do? I'm one of those people who like keeps like between us, right? Like, and like I got like a, not an image, but like a brand back home. So I'm not gonna be like saying all this crazy shit.
No, I get that.
It could be cool if we were on the same page about it.
Will
Like,
be
just-
cool.
So I wasn't sure what that meant. At the time, I was like, a brand? Like, are you online in some capacity and you don't want people to know that you have sex with someone? Or is it more of like a religious, spiritual thing? And there was a part of me that was even worried that maybe he had a girlfriend or someone back home that he wouldn't want to know that he was being physically intimate with someone else. So when he said he had a brand, I really wasn't sure what he meant by that. And I kind of wanted them to explore it further. In the reunion, Hannah reveals that she found a journal entry of Nick's.
It's 2 weeks right before we left.
2 weeks before you left for the pod.
So there was 3 entries. So one goes, he wants to sell 2 homes this year. Okay. He wants to be in the best shape of his life in the next 2 weeks. And then the third bullet point, which was by far the most interesting, was that he wants to be the most famous person ever on Love is Blind.
Once Hannah shared that Nick wanted to be famous, I started thinking about this moment again where he talked about his brand and wondered if they were related. What are your thoughts? My view is that these two were never really compatible in the first place, but it's hard to look at everything without considering that now. Both Hannah and Nick said things that made me think again that they were sometimes more focused on the surface level things than the actual connection between the two of them. I thought Nick in particular was sending some mixed messages. Like he says to Hannah,
I want to see what the girls look like for sure. What these beautiful women look like. Not in that way.
then he randomly jumps into, you don't have lip filler, do you?
What?
Your lips aren't done up, right?
Like injections?
Yeah.
No.
I know. I'm just making sure.
Then he's like, if I made enough money, would you get work done?
No, I haven't got any work done in my face.
If I got the money for it, would you get it?
Like work done?
So the question was, do you have a problem with someone having work, or are you trying to ask her in a passive aggressive way whether or not she'd be open to getting work done because maybe that's something you'd like her to do? I really wanted to understand more about why he was asking those questions. I really just didn't know what to make of it. Because then he goes,
I think natural women are the most beautiful.
but it sounded like you were asking if she'd be open to getting work done if you had the money to pay for it. So what are you trying to communicate there? Then they have the moment where Nick rides the duck with the older lady and she says to Hannah,
oh, she's jealous. Don't be jealous.
So I thought that it was interesting that Hannah told Nick before he even wrote the duck that she would get the ick if he did.
Oh God, Nick, don't do it. I can't look.
What do you mean?
So give me the ick.
Why does that give you the ick?
This whole concept of getting the ick is something that's coming up a lot this season. And honestly, I kind of was glad that Nick went ahead and rode the duck anyway, because I thought that for her to tell him that he couldn't be playful in that way, it could establish a controlling dynamic. And sometimes you have to kind of nip that kind of stuff in the bud early on just to make it clear we both make decisions about what we do here. And of course you want to be respectful of your partner, but something like that where it's not hurting anybody, you're just having fun, I think that that might be an unfair ask. That's fair if she's just giving him that up front. Now we got to talk about his response to the lady calling Hannah jealous. Two things here, right? And this is where we can see how both parties contribute to unhealthy communication about an issue. I do agree with Hannah that in that moment, Nick was communicating that he was more in cahoots with this stranger than he was with his fiance. But to kind of laugh with another woman who's calling your partner something negative, especially while we're still trying to establish our relationship, I can see why that would be off-putting to Hannah. But I also agreed with Nick when he wanted Hannah to just admit that she was feeling some jealousy.
I think you were just jealous.
Of what, the dog? The lady?
Of the lady.
Yeah. It's ripping me apart.
I thought that Nick asking after that, saying, well, if this is an issue for you, how will you handle in general the feelings of jealousy that could come up as we interact with the other couples and maybe even meet some of the other people from the pods, which did end up becoming a bit of an issue later on, validly. But that, of course, is going to really affect the trajectory of a relationship when you can't really own up to how you're feeling. Because my belief is that in a way, Hannah was feeling a little jealous about that moment between Nick and the older lady. So then we get to all of the couples meeting for the first time. Nick reveals that he found some notes with a bunch of questions about him, like if he was mature, if he's dedicated, if he has self-confidence, or if he's cocky. As he was reading it, he said that it really hurt his feelings.
Just a bunch of adjectives. Hurt me.
This is what I thought Nick did much better than Hannah over the course of their relationship. Was I felt like Nick was being a little bit more forthcoming about how things affected him. And the thing about being a very self-sufficient person like Hannah is that you sometimes don't want to admit that people have the power over you to make you feel things that you don't want to feel. And so I think that a lot of times Hannah missed out on opportunities to be vulnerable and open and develop emotional intimacy with Nick by not really sharing how she feels, but more critiquing what he's doing. I think it'd be a stronger message to say, when you do this, I feel this, versus saying you need to stop doing such and such, right? Because that person then just feels like you're parenting them and not really opening up to them about how their actions affect you. He asked a valid question.
Like, why would you write that down and not talk to me?
At first I was thinking, well, you're not talking to her about it. You found it and you're talking to the guys about it, but he did bring it up later with her. So he did try to have this conversation with her and find out, why were you writing these things about me? I started thinking that maybe Hannah had gotten so accustomed to writing things out in the pods and felt like this was a great way for her to process her feelings or questions, and she was continuing that outside of the pods. It's something that you're able to do in that pod environment that is very risk-free. Everybody's doing it. They literally give you a journal with your name on it, and you can make all of your notes and have a date without your partner seeing that you're doing that and knowing they're doing the same thing. On a regular date, you can't do that. On a regular date, I can't sit across the table from someone at dinner and say, hold on a second, and write down notes about what they're saying. But I think that that is a great way to be able to really pay attention to what is being said and be able to reflect on how your feelings have evolved over time. But if she was going to do that, bare minimum, you could hide it. When Hannah talks with Nick about how she felt with the woman on the duck later on, Nick does invalidate her perspective.
But a woman's talking just like sitting there giggling. Do you know how it would make me feel though? Do you understand?
So you do get jealous. That means nothing. That was so like irrelevant.
She tries to share why that bothered her, and he was not very understanding. So in a situation like that, where I'd be encouraging one of the partners that I'm seeing to open up about how you really feel, if I see somebody doing what Nick was doing, which is basically invalidating it, I say, wait, did you even hear what they said? Are you listening to understand? Or are you listening to counter them? This is not a courtroom. If you walk out of here not understanding their perspective, you both lose. Only way you win is if you can understand where they're coming from, so that way you can better predict how your actions may affect them in the future. And I think the thing that really hurt Nick was reading that Hannah thought that he was delusional, and he really wanted to know what she meant by that.
Last bullet point, like delusional.
Yeah.
You think I'm delusional?
So Hannah accepted this narrative that she is more emotionally intelligent than Nick. In the first impressions video, someone left a comment that I totally agreed with, which is that Hannah often confuses being self-sufficient with being mature. A lot of what Hannah was referencing is like financial literacy and knowing how to cook certain things, having lived on her own, having these life experiences. But that is not the same as being mature. I think Hannah was very unclear on what she wanted, and a lot of what I saw Nick do did show some signs of emotional immaturity, in that he didn't recognize how his actions might impact another person. So I think that he was, as he said, inexperienced with relationships in general. But I think that Hannah also had a lot of room for growth and self-reflection. But she did have some good moments of self-awareness where she recognized that she was being pretty critical of Nick.
I think like a bad habit that I have is I like things the way I like things, and everyone else just can't do it as good as me, which I know is wrong, because like people do their thing that they want to do, and you do dishes a certain way, or if you do the bed a certain way, that's how you do it, and that's okay. Maybe it's not the way I like it, but like it's different.
And so whenever I see self-awareness, I know a person has really taken one of the biggest steps to self-growth. First, you have to recognize that there's the opportunity for improvement. And I thought that Hannah had the self-awareness, but she was having a hard time with correcting it. And that's why a lot of times I wish that they would have some support on these shows. So when a person like Hannah sees that she's having these issues, someone can kind of help her recognize this is the trigger for you doing that. This is the history of why you're doing that. Here's what I want you to try instead, to see how the relationships can develop with a little bit more support. So Hannah visits Nick's home, which he lives with his parents. And so I think that that was also something that for a lot of people can be a turnoff, is knowing that a partner lives with their parents. Hannah said that if they did end up moving forward with their relationship, that she would expect for Nick to move in with her. Understandable that you wouldn't want to live with his parents. But this did introduce something interesting, which is that Nick's family is Catholic and Hannah isn't religious.
Does she know I'm not religious?
No.
Will she care, you think?
No, as long as she sees good values in you. That's all that matters.
Nick kind of said, you know, they won't care about you not being Catholic, which could be true, but I'm curious in the long run how that would look for Hannah and Nick. Does Nick identify as Catholic? What are his beliefs? What does he want to teach his children? Sometimes we gloss over that during the dating phase of things, and we're like, we'll worry about it later, but it can turn into a big issue. I have seen many couples successfully navigate it, but we do have to recognize that this is not the sort of thing that you can just gloss over, because most of the time it's not just about the parents. The question is, what have you internalized from how you were raised and how you want to raise your kids? And even more specifically, how you want to spend your time, how you want to spend your money, even if you guys never have kids. Do you want to donate to the church, for example? Do you expect that you guys will go to church? How do you want to handle the officiant of your wedding? There are so many things that differences in those beliefs can impact even beyond children. So then we start getting to the tougher conversations, the conversations about finances.
We'll split all utilities. We'll split rent.
Yep.
Who's paying the bills?
Hannah says that she's the type of person that wants to have a plan. I tend to lean more toward what Hannah's talking about, especially in a situation like this. You already have such an expedited process for deciding whether or not you're marrying someone. Finances is a huge aspect of that. Nick was avoiding the conversation.
financially, right?
Yeah.
When we get married, you don't want to join our account.
We could play it by ear. For now,
I'm not a play it by ear type of person.
We've seen couples who played it by ear and they seemed like they were a great couple, but ultimately finances is what ruined the relationship after the show. And so that is not something you want to gloss over. The financial conversation is very important. I think part of why Nick didn't want to talk about it is A, the tone that Hannah brings.
Are you going to join my car insurance and are we going to pay that together? Or are you going to continue to stay on your parents' car insurance when we get married?
what would be the benefit of joining, being together on
that you're paying your own bills?
Nick also admits that he doesn't have a ton of experience with managing a household. He lives with his parents. He doesn't have a lot of expenses. And so they are definitely coming with two very different backgrounds when it comes to having conversations around finances. And I think Nick was becoming overwhelmed because he didn't know how to contribute to the conversation. And if he said the wrong thing, I think he assumed that Hannah would get very frustrated with him and say mean things about him and to him. Based on what we saw, I think that's a valid fear. So if you're already touching on an area that you're not that comfortable discussing because you don't know much about it, so it's a vulnerability, and then you're not really in a safe space to do that, what do? Do you just engage in the conversation and just brace yourself for what's going to inevitably turn into an argument or a bashing session? And so I could understand why Nick was hesitant to talk about it, but I did agree with Hannah that it was something they definitely needed to figure out instead of just playing it by ear, because they absolutely needed to know what their plan would be before they would decide to move forward in a marriage. So I thought that Nick meeting Hannah's brother was very interesting. We've got some of the independent living skill factors that Nick has not yet developed, like knowing how to boil water or knowing where the pasta is. I don't think those are small things. I think that that is reflective of a person who is still highly dependent on others to survive. So I don't think that that is a small thing. I do understand why that would make Hannah a little bit worried and panicked as well. He can be a good person, but still not ready for marriage or not ready to take care of a spouse and family or contribute to the care of a family. That is fair. I don't think that Hannah was wrong to be concerned about those things, but I do think her delivery didn't really create an atmosphere for him to learn or grow. It did feel like it was a more punitive environment than a learning environment. But I do think it's super interesting that Hannah's brother validated Nick's concerns about Hannah.
There have been multiple times where she said something way more cool. I can take that stuff, but like
that's
the 20th time it's like, okay, like
that's been like my issue with her. Like, she's great, but also she'll say things and then if I say the same level of thing back, it's like a problem.
She can dish it, but she can't take it. That's not a good quality to have, especially when Hannah takes such pride in being a direct person and she calls herself a truth speaker when she's with her friends later on. So if you are going to be that kind of person, you should be able to hear it as well. But Hannah instead gets very frustrated and upset if someone says something negative or bad about her, which again would indicate to me that she is not ready for marriage, because if you're going to be constantly providing feedback to your partner, which is expected. A relationship in general, marriage in general, is a constant loop of feedback. It's behavior feedback. Does your partner reward you with a kiss or do they give you a scowl? You are constantly looking for responses to the things that you're doing. So if Hannah is not open to any negative responses but is easily dishing them, that is a person to me that I do not think is ready for marriage. Then when Nick meets the rest of Hannah's family, it's interesting to see that Hannah's hopes for that conversation was that they would grill him.
Grill him or what?
Well, I don't know how to grill.
I just want to talk and just feel like what he's like.
Okay. You don't have to grill me just yet.
Yeah, I think you've grilled him plenty.
I'm not sure what the point of grilling him is now.
So I think that Hannah views a person being very direct, maybe even to the point of being cruel, as a sign of caring. And it was interesting to see how Hannah's mom responded to some of Hannah's statements about her being perfect. And she wanted to make sure, like, are you joking or are you serious?
There's definitely things that we're both picky about, but she has a little bit longer of a list than mine. I want someone to be very
It's because I'm so perfect, it's hard for him to come up with things. Are you being serious?
Yeah. I'm easy to fall in love with.
Oh my gosh.
And her mom kind of made light of it, like, all of my kids have a lot of confidence, but she did seem a bit flabbergasted and concerned. So I was looking at it two ways. On one hand, I was like, okay, so even her family is validating that a lot of the things that Nick is having issues with are things that they've experienced problems with as well, or can at least see in this moment.
I'm very overcritical of you, but at the same time, we are getting married, so I just want to make sure I'm sure when I say yes.
Yeah.
Relax, you seem very stressed.
But I also was wondering, since her family was kind of analyzing how she was in the situation, and she talks about even how her parents cut her off at 18, is it that her family, even though in this situation they didn't present this way, maybe they've been somewhat critical or strict, which has taught Hannah to be more critical of herself and thus critical of others? So there were two different ways, and maybe they're both true, that I thought the family meeting could have showed us a little bit more about Hannah. And Hannah does tell them that one of the reasons that she is so overwhelmed is because she's like, I should be more in love instead of just stressed. So that's a cycle, right? You're stressed about being stressed, so you're more stressed. So it was hard to know what was Hannah's actual feelings regarding the relationship and what was Hannah panicking about her feelings regarding the relationship. So then Hannah meets Nick's family. She brings them thoughtful gifts. They love her. And we see that lighter, more fun side of Hannah that we see in other settings other than when she is with Nick. Now, keep in mind, I know this is such a stressful decision that she has to make, and she was already having a hard time in the pods. So I know being in real life, it's going to be so hard to get out of your head. How do I make the best decision for me, the best decision for you? What do I do? So I know why she was so hard with Nick, but I do think that by not being able to be relaxed and show the other side of herself, that in a way she was kind of sabotaging the relationship because she was so committed to finding everything out about Nick and how things would work that she never showed the fun side of what the relationship could look like once they figure all that stuff out. That's an important part of the experiment too, right? Do you enjoy each other? And I don't think Hannah was able to really show 100% of herself because she was feeling really worried about what would happen after the altar. You know, Hannah is in some ways a very strong-minded person. In other ways, like we've talked about, pretty easily influenced and swayed. I think she wants to be stronger in her convictions and opinions than she really is. I think that is one of the things about being younger, is that a lot of times the world is fixed in a certain way, and as you get older and you see more nuance, you kind of start seeing like, things I thought even 2 years ago might not necessarily apply to how I feel today. And so I think sometimes that is also the issue with having younger people on a show like this that requires you to make so many decisions so quickly. But as Hannah's talking with Nick about her view on the importance of her parents' opinion around him, she said,
it's nice to have like family and friends' opinions, but at the end of the day, I don't really care what anyone else thinks. My opinion's the only opinion that matters.
I think that even though she was talking about it in that specific context of her parents' approval, I think that what we saw was that that is really what she felt in general a lot of times, that only her opinion mattered when it came to really negotiating how things should look or work in their relationship. Now, let me validate Hannah. It's fair that she would want him to take more initiative. No one wants to feel like they're nagging their partner to do basic things when they're living together. And if Nick was very serious about this relationship moving forward, I think that that is something that he would have been pushing himself to do more often. But Nick is also making the argument that Hannah is not paying attention to the things that he is doing. Like she says, I don't want to have to remind you to take out the trash. He's like, well, there are times I'm taking out the trash and you just don't know because I took it out. So there are some disagreements about what's happening. And a lot of that happens in couples therapy where two people are very clear on what did or did not happen, and they both feel like their perspective is right. And at that point, I have to tell them, you know, we don't have hidden cameras in your home. We'll never be able to prove to the other that you were right. And most of the time, your partner is not lying. This is really just how they saw it. So what do we do from here? How do we move forward from here? Because we can get very, very stuck going back and forth on who's telling the truth, who's stating the facts, when it's impossible for us to not just state opinion, because our biases affect even the way we recall memory. But I also think that Hannah had some unfair expectations of Nick as well.
When we were in the pods and you were talking about how much I read, and you were like, I would love to read. Like, have you read?
I haven't had a chance to.
Now look, I'm a reader girly myself. I love if my husband wants to pick up a book. Reading is not a priority for him, but I can't fault him for not reading when I'm reading, right? So in a way, this is Hannah wanting Nick to be a different person. And that is always the biggest sign to me that you're with the wrong person. When you want your partner to change, fundamental aspects of their self, be a different person. I know that later on Hannah and her friends say, you know, she doesn't want you to change and be a different person. You do want him to be a different person, and it's okay to say that, and it's okay to not be with him because of that. After a certain point, you're not just asking for behavioral change, you're asking for this person to have the same values as you. And I think her giving him a hard time about reading is another example of her really wishing that he was someone that he isn't. So Nick finally tells Hannah that he feels like she treats him like he's inferior.
In Mexico, I couldn't figure out the lights. Like, you got pissed when I couldn't figure out the 50 lights. But that wasn't like a one-time thing, right? Like, hey Hannah, you know where the disposal is? Mm-hmm. No, you didn't say I was stupid, but like, you're like, come on, Nick, like, you should know this. Sometimes I feel like, you know, you do think I'm maybe sometimes like a level below you.
And from what we saw, I can validate that. I could see why he would feel that way. And that is contempt. When you engage with your partner or anyone as though you are their superior, and especially when you speak down to them in a condescending way and reference things that you do that they don't do or they should do, that is contempt. And so for Hannah to speak to Nick the way that she did and say things like, I turned a boy into a man, those little things stick. And even if in the moment Nick is getting past it, he brings it up after the fact, calling him delusional, saying you turned him into a man, because it sticks, it hurts. And even if the conversation has moved, how is he ever going to let go of the understanding that you don't respect him? So then we get to the mixer, I guess it's like a Roaring 20s mixer, and Nick passive aggressively mentions that people might need closure.
I think some people are gonna want closure.
Really?
I mean, yeah. You know,
Is there anyone you want closure with, Nick?
And he talks about how he had a connection with Katie and he probably wanted to talk with her about that. And so when we do see that Nick is talking with Katie, I found the conversation to be inappropriate. He did admit that he's a natural flirt, but some of those things to say.
Honestly, I was attracted to you from day one. I was like, damn, Katie's always on my mind.
I know you gave me goosebumps.
You gave me goosebumps.
I didn't really care for how Katie was engaging with him either. I thought their conversation felt a little too flirtatious for you to have a fiance. That's how I felt. And I'm curious how it felt for you all. But I am glad that Katie had a serious moment with him where she explained to him exactly why she ended things with him.
The objectifying.
Yeah.
Like that one date you were like, oh, I just know you're sexy. I know you're this. I know you're that. I think you lead with your charm and your charisma.
Yeah.
Too hard. I think that's a defense mechanism, which is maybe coming from a place of insecurity.
I think that is very true, that Nick is grappling with maybe some insecurity, some disappointment with where he is in life. It doesn't seem like he's very proud of being in real estate right now. For example, he literally says, I'm doing real estate like everyone else is doing. So I think that is something that brings him a bit of shame, and he kind of overcompensates by being very suave. He even liked that they were referring to him as Rico Suave, which was really like an insult, but he liked it, I think, because it was closer to the image he was trying to project than maybe the image he actually has as a person who really hasn't done a lot of dating. One thing that we see often that happens on the show is that people kind of forget that they're being recorded, and they start rewriting the truth as they would in real life without any proof of what they said. So Nick, for example, when they get back,
You said the person you need closure with is Katie.
I didn't need closure.
That's what you said.
I didn't say I
What
needed
did you
closure.
say?
It said if there was someone I wanted to talk to, it would be Katie.
you definitely said you needed closure. That was caught on camera. And as Hannah's trying to engage with him about what he and Katie talked about, she says they had a 40-minute conversation. He was definitely deflecting and not really answering and saying, oh, if she's your best friend, talk to her. Well, if you're her fiance, why can't she talk to you, right? I think that Nick also felt that the conversation they had was inappropriate, and that is why he didn't really want to provide more details. He's looking off and laughing and not really engaging. You know, we call that stonewalling. That's when a person is not really engaging in a conversation. They're creating a barrier, maybe by not making eye contact, maybe by just shutting down and not speaking at all. So in this moment, Nick is not engaging with Hannah, but I wouldn't say that Hannah is really healthily or successfully engaging with him either, because she's coming from such an angry stance that she's not really creating the floor where he would even feel safe to say what happened. But I also think that Nick was still processing her making that comment.
You mature enough, Nick, because I taught you everything that you know. I turned into a boy into a man.
When Nick meets Hannah's friends, Hannah and her friends, it almost turns like they're just ganging up against Nick. It feels like they had this goal of, we're going to tell him everything he needs to do to be a good partner to you, and we're just going to back up everything Hannah says. I personally believe that the things that Hannah was asking of Nick was her asking him to change who he was. He even said he's willing to change his personality for her. That's how you know it was that counter to how he was living his life and how he sees himself. And so Hannah's like, no, these are just behaviors, but behaviors are a reflection of your values. If I choose to clean instead of take a nap, for example, I might be the type of person who really prioritizes having a clean home. I can't sleep without making sure that I've cleaned. Another person might really prioritize rest over cleanliness. And not to say that they're both not a priority, but it is important to recognize that we might have differing levels of prioritization when it comes to certain values. And so what Hannah was asking of Nick was not in alignment with his priorities. I think his only priority he's claiming is just to make her happy, but it was also taking a lot of effort on his end to change everything he's doing, while Hannah really wasn't making many accommodations at all because Nick really wasn't asking her to. When it's time for the dress fittings, Hannah doesn't go. Her mom comes over and she's kind of talking with her about the fact that she and Nick are not compatible.
It's like Nick doesn't match me intellectually. Nick doesn't match my humor. She doesn't match me creatively. He doesn't match me financially. He doesn't match me like anywhere.
And I thought it was interesting that Hannah's mom was like,
None of that matters if you love each other. None of that matters.
But that's not true. Those things definitely do matter. And when you are in love with someone, the feeling of love can ebb and flow. You can have periods where you're feeling so much love and periods where you might even be feeling disgust, disdain because of the stage of life that you all are in. But those values, having similar life goals, having partnership, knowing you can count on your partner to do certain things where you're not able to do them, those things can sustain a relationship during those periods where the love feelings might not be that strong. And so I didn't agree with Hannah's mom that those things don't matter. Then Hannah initiates the conversation with Nick about ending things. She voices concerns about Nick being very concerned about his image.
You don't want to look bad. You said, I don't want you to just sit here and make me look bad. That's exactly what you said, Nick.
Because I know this was going to be a grill sesh.
Now, maybe he was saying some things that she didn't say that made it like more concerning. I thought some of the things that Hannah was saying during the breakup were very ironic. Like she says, respect, you have none. The irony of that, because the way you're even communicating that is so disrespectful.
Because I can use specific examples. I don't know if you can, but I can. And because I remember things I know you don't, but like.
You're just throwing shade for no reason.
And I'm glad that Nick called her out and said, like, just tell me how you're feeling. Like, let's end this on a good note. It felt like she was expecting people to give her applause for telling him off for something. And it's like, just tell him how you feel. You don't have to say it with such contempt and such animosity. Hannah kept reiterating that she's so mature and Nick is immature. But I feel like emotionally, Nick might have shown more signs of maturity than Hannah. We always think of things as like, it's straight up mature, immature. But you can be mature in some areas and immature in others. I think Nick showed more emotional maturity than Hannah because he tried his best not to personalize mean things that she was saying. He would call out in a calm manner when he felt that she was saying things that were hurtful. And he told her, you know, I want to be my best for you. And he was struggling. Hannah is more mature when it comes to independent living skills. She understands bills. She knows how to cook. She has her own place. She takes care of a pet. Hannah has more maturity when it comes to being self-sufficient. But Nick, I think, actually showed more maturity when it came to conversation and listening and trying to compartmentalize things and move forward.
You're always demeaning, you're always talking down on me. We're not equals here. It doesn't feel that way at all.
I don't think either one of them was a perfect depiction of what maturity looks like. So those are my thoughts on Nick and Hannah. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with my perspective on their relationship? I think overall, this was a couple that really was just very incompatible from the start. I think they might have been engaging with each other like through their high school versions of themselves, but not really thinking about what them as adults today, what they're needing out of a partnership. And that is what really ultimately ended up manifesting and being the demise of the relationship that they were trying to build. I ask that you like this video, subscribe to my channel, share it with anyone that you think might find it entertaining or educational. Hello to anybody who's in the live premiere with me. I love chatting with you guys during these lives. I can't wait to watch the next one with you. I appreciate you for watching this video all the way until the end. You didn't have to do that, but the fact that you did helps me out so much with the algorithm. So thank you, thank you, thank you. What's on your mind?